welcome everybody to our January 2023 Global Power Platform Admins user group. So we're kicking off 2023. Thank you for coming here, being part of this today. Thank you, Ilya, for coming today, talking about admin, talking about your new book. Really excited to hear what you've got going on. 2022 was really cool. We had some great speakers. We had some really good engagement. We finished the year with our first freestyle chat. And that was also taken back by some of the people at Microsoft and actually listened to. So some of the things that we were talking about are kind of making their way back. So we'll do another freestyle chat in March. We'll kind of keep breaking those up because it gives us an opportunity to talk to each other as admins and kind of get an idea of what we're doing, talk about issues that we're having, come up with solutions, and it just also gives us a chance to get to know each other a little bit better. So thank you for your involvement in that, and we'll keep growing that this year. Again, we're a global community. We're dedicated to furthering the knowledge of maintaining and supporting the Power Platform. Again, and that's done through inclusion and the idea that this is really a global group. So thank you for, again, contributing to our Teams channels, to the chats that are going on there, and answering questions for others who are having questions or issues. Let's keep growing that as we move forward into 2023 as well. This month in the COE starter kit, so there isn't actually a release this month. So for those of you who were in the office hours last month, you'll know that the COE team finally took a break. So a much needed release break, and the one in December was pretty amazing. But they will be back in February with a new release, so we can expect some great stuff there at that time. I did come across a couple of things recently, which might be worth looking at from a reading perspective. There's a two-part. There's a protecting data with Dataverse and then protecting data with Dataverse Part 2. So the first one is kind of talking about the external threats and how you can address those and a lot of the controls and things that are available to us. And then the second part is actually talking about the internal threats. They're really good articles and worth your time if you do have the time. The last one was one that I saw, which was the story of MFA and the Center of Excellence by the CRM Ninja, and this is talking about how we can start to use MFA accounts in COE now, and it has to do with the max, lose the max age value inside of there, so that you can have that. You get the token, but you maintain your session throughout. But the token can be revoked at any time. So for those of you who have installed the COE and that's been a problem for you and have been a problem for your company or your AD admins or anybody like that, you may want to go ahead and look into that. I know it's something that we're going to start looking at as well. And if you do have anything that you want to contribute and you're reading anything like that you feel is great for the group, please feel free to send it along, post it in the Teams chat, anything like that, and we'll make sure that we get that out and keep that conversation going. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Ilya. So Ilya Fainberg is here today to talk to us about his new book that's coming out. Finally, we have an admin book and all of his experience. And for those of you who have been able to follow him on YouTube or have heard him speak, you know that this is a really special day. So Ilya, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Let me share my screen, and I have a few slides to show you. I'll try to do it in something like half an hour, and then we'll have some time for conversation as well. So let me know if you see it. I think you should.
Yeah, we can see it. Thanks.
All right. So I guess a few words about myself and kind of what I do and how I came into into what I am today. So I actually started out as a developer. Started out fairly young. Like my first project, which actually was like a custom CRM solution, which was a bit ironic, was built when I was 15 years old. It was a CRM-based solution that was made to automate medical institutions. So it was used in several hospitals, and then it was also adopted to be used in several private ambulance companies. I was at my kind of younger years, didn't really decide yet on being, in the whole IT sphere, and thought I'll go into the whole medicine area. And I have a lot of doctors in my family. And I kind of this first project was a combination of the two, so a bit of a medical profession, which I also learned a bit later, but also with my aspirations into like programming and getting into all those computer stuff, as they called it back then. And that was more than 20 years ago. And I haven't really stopped since then. So I worked as a developer in like many different settings. So like the first project was about CRM, but everything after that was like very different things. I worked on developing custom financial solutions. I worked on building custom chips, so like embedded software, even designing custom chips based on ARM or based on custom cores. For example, when I was 18, I worked at a company where I was tasked with building custom hardware software for nuclear power plants. And well, none of them blew up yet, so I'm happy about that. So at least I did a good job there. And yeah, I mean, since then I've basically been a developer for like quite a long time, until at some point I decided to move into the whole consulting space, into business applications, and kind of this more kind of high level thing where I can, I guess, drive more impact or kind of influence more by doing essentially less, which very much jives very well with the motto that we have today at Microsoft, do more with less. And that was kind of my aspiration, going into more the architecture side of things and being the person who, designs solution rather than the person who actually spends the time writing the code and builds them, which, again, very strangely brought me into the whole low-code, no-code space. So, from being a developer that basically wrote, assembler for hardware chips, I ended up being an architect as part of the Microsoft product group, building no-code and low-code applications, business applications for like the largest customers in the world. I worked in 40 different countries across probably any industry that you can think of, and in a lot of large companies. So in companies that many people heard about for the most part. And all that experience brought me into the desire of trying to kind of share my experience, because a lot of the things that you do from day to day at work as a consultant, then as an architect, then as a program manager, which is what I do today. A lot of things that you talk about with customers are being left on the table. So, I mean, you can suggest ideas, you can give advice. Some of it is being taken into consideration. Some of it isn't, because it's not relevant to the project, or maybe it's something that the customer doesn't want, even though maybe it's a good idea. And that was essentially brought me to social media initially, and then to the idea of writing the book. Well, I mean, the idea of writing the book wasn't it's something that I wanted to do, and I was lucky enough to be reached out to by a publisher who suggested that I could write a book with them, which is essentially what I'm doing right now. And kind of what I wanted to do in that book is to essentially start from the beginning, not trying to focus on like the development part perhaps, or like more technical things, but trying to talk more about the building of the infrastructure, building of the administration part, of the compliance part, of security, some of the high level architecture, what the components are and what they're used for. And I think this is something that, as Andrew mentioned, is not really there, not talked about a lot. And there's a lot of new things and a lot of new features in terms of compliance, in terms of kind of administration, which are just coming out for the Power Platform. And as a person who's like very much hands-on involved in building out those things and working with our largest customers in the world, and seeing how they struggle with some enterprise scenarios, I understand that we have plenty of partners who have talented developers and talented app makers who can build any Power App you want, but we don't have that much information, even like in our official documentation at Microsoft, in terms of how you actually organized all that into an functioning infrastructure that especially applies to larger enterprises or even medium-sized enterprises. Like it tells you how to build the app, but it doesn't tell you how to manage the app or how to manage the landscape. And this is where the book is trying to focus on. So if we try to summarize what the book is about, it's about kind of the understanding that we now are at a time where there's a shift in between how enterprise applications used to be built and how they are built today. So it used to be that an organization, that wanted to build a business application or some kind of process or integration, whatever it is, they would have hire a team of developers, of partners, consulting firm that would come in and build something for them, and it would be a team of developers and testers and UX designers and whatever it is, and then they would create something that they will have to maintain for the rest of the lifetime of that product, something new, something custom, whatever it is. And you see that a lot in some industries, especially where specialized software is needed, but it's not entirely available on the market. Like, for example, if you ever worked in the telecom industry, in most businesses you come in, they have some, few core systems. They have an ERP, they have a CRM, they have, some systems, some like solutions which are based on off-the-shelf solutions. But in telecoms, they have like literally they can have thousands of custom-made apps. Some of them, made in the 90s or in the 80s, and no one knows how they work, and they're still relying on them functioning. But this is not how things are being done today, right? Today, when you build a business application, you are no longer part of a large team that has the resources to think about everything, to build everything, to test everything. You are usually part of a much smaller team, and often you are part of a team of one. Like if you were to administer a huge enterprise landscape in the 90s or in the 2000s or even 10 years ago, to be honest, you would be a team of, 10, 20, 30 people. You can be like an entire department of people who are doing just that. Today, in many organizations, even large organizations, we see that the people who are, quote unquote, cloud admins or Power Platform admins, it's like one person. It's like 2 people, 3 people at most, right? And all those, even though you have to do less because a lot of it is being done for you, and there's kind of obviously this no-code situation, you still need to think about all the considerations around security, around compliance, around the overall architecture and how it's been built and how it's been implemented. It's all on that small team or even on that one person. It's not difficult to do in terms of point and click, yeah. But thinking about how you actually do it and what are the needs of the organization and how to best address those needs, on what button you need to press, that's the difficulty here today. So the thought process is still there, even if the execution became very, very simple. And that is where the book is trying to go into and explore those areas of Power Platform. And it's not like the book is supposed to be a replacement for, the Microsoft documentation. It's not like I saw a few books about like building Power Apps, and it's literally like, a list of steps. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. And there's like screenshots and there's links and, all that. And that's kind of not what I wanted to do. This is, I didn't want to do a quote unquote cookbook, like something that it just, you follow the steps and it is fine, but then the book becomes obsolete in like 2-3 years when all the steps change and we change the UI and whatever else. I wanted to do something that is something that is an added value on top of the documentation that already exists. So, I mean, you will still need to open documentation to do some steps. The book will not, take your hand and show you exactly how to do certain stuff, although in some areas it would. The book is more about telling stories, talking about business cases and use cases, and showing you how Power Platform would address those different cases through those stories. And those stories come from my 20 plus years experience in that field, in the field of enterprise applications in general, in 10 plus years in the field of business applications, dynamic specifically applications, and of course from my current experience with Power Platform at Microsoft. So the book is trying to not to give you a step-by-step instruction of what you need to do, but trying to explain to you in what situations you could do this or that. I mean, it doesn't tell you that, here's this feature and you can use it. It tells you a story, and through that story, it tells you, and if you want to solve that problem, then you need that feature. But if you want to solve this problem, then this feature is not something that you need. Moreover, this feature might be something that would be contrary to what you want to achieve. So this is kind of the approach I try to take, and it is, I would say, very different from what you would see from other books in that area. And I have reviewed several books in the Power Platform kind of field, cookbooks and books that talk about Power Platform in general. So yeah, that's the general approach. Also wanted to maybe go over through the chapters and the parts that we have in the book. I don't want to take too much of your time. I mean, I can probably talk about it for 2 hours, but I wanted to at least show you what's inside the book on a very, very high level. So the book is separated into four different parts, and each part is kind of responsible for its own area of Power Platform, or its own, I guess an area of Power Platform. So the first part we have here 6 chapters, and they are all about deployment of Power Platform components and what Power Platform is built from. And what those components are being used for, and it has some technical stuff about how you set up certain things and how you achieve certain things, and of course, as I mentioned, all that is being told through use cases, through business cases, through storytelling, and yeah, this is kind of an approach that I personally like. This is I feel that it creates a more memorable experience than just giving people instructions. And it answers the question of why you do certain things and not just, do it because I told you so. And in the first part, we have, first of all, chapter that covers, what Power Platform is actually made of. The components, the description. The book is trying to address not just people who are experts in Power Platform, but perhaps for people who are also on the maybe not total beginners, but people who are not as familiar with Power Platform. So it could be like IT professionals which are trying to get into Power Platform administration, or architects who are trying to understand how to best explain to the customers how to administer the system that they're going to deliver, or even for the developers to do the same, because developers are sometimes they're hyper focused on a specific area and really have no idea of how other stuff works. Like, I know how to build Canvas apps, but I have no idea how portals even work or being configured, or what are the use cases, or what are the considerations. So that gives you that kind of overview for developers and for architects, and of course for its primary audience, the people who are actually going to administer the Power Platform organization. Then we have the chapter about licensing. This is, I would say, a topic that is, it's been underestimated constantly in projects that I see. So there's so often situations where they design everything and you have documents and they build everything, And then the customer says, okay, so what kind of licenses do I need to purchase for next quarter? And then they do the calculation and they're, well, that's a big number. Can we maybe change the architecture a bit to make the number smaller? And then you start building what's called, a license-oriented architecture, and that's really like a bad idea. I mean, it's not a bad idea to consider the costs in the architecture, but it is a bad idea, and it's something that I talk about in the book, to think about it last, which both customers and even like all established partners tend to think last about, unfortunately. So the next chapter will be about creating environments and users. This is kind of more technical stuff, but it also explains of, what environments actually are on technical level, and in what cases you would create what kind of environments, and in what, it talks about geographies for different environments and different types of environments, and how you would use all that approach. Then we have a chapter about setting up Dataverse and Dynamics. The book is not specifically about Dynamics, but because Dynamics is a very big part of Power Platform, and especially is almost an inevitable part of any enterprise implementation, it does mention that, what it is, and the parts that it has, and how you would kind of approach the administration of Dynamics, even though it's not like a book that is dedicated to that particular topic. Setting up the rest of the Power Platform applications, so Power Apps, Canvas Apps, Power Portals, today it's called Power Pages, Power Automate, and all the other components is also covered. And the last chapter in this part is the hybrid cloud. So this is a discussion about how you connect your cloud applications in your deployment, how you extend your deployment into on-premises with on-premises gateway and with other tools that you might have in Power Platform to kind of make sure that your cloud solution is not just a cloud solution, but also extends to every place where it needs to go and gets every piece of data that it needs to get, and is able to connect to every system that it needs to connect to create a complete solution and not just the cloud solution. Then the next part is it's about security and reliability. So we have a few chapters here. We have a chapter about understanding the needs of your organization. This goes, again, this kind of takes a step back from the technical stuff and talks about things which are, I guess, usually more in the purview of an architect, so the analysis and design. It doesn't talk about the design thing because it's not obviously it's not expected that the audience of that book would create designs for Power Platform, but it does talk about the analysis part, because from your point of view as a person who represents an organization that implements Power Platform, you would be on the side of the business trying to understand what the business actually needs and how to translate that into your requirements, into your technical requirements, into your non-functional requirements that you need from the implementation partner or the implementation team that does the actual hands-on work. And this is a part where, again, I'm relying a lot of business cases on stories to try and explain to the reader how would you translate, what the business says, what Janice from accounting wants, into how it actually should be implemented and what should be the expectation from the implementation team when they deliver that requirement to you as a customer. Then we have a chapter about securing business data. So this is this is about securing your business data. This is about all the approaches to compliance and to security that we have in Power Platform. I'm trying to cover kind of all the latest innovations that we have in Power Platform and different strategies for different kinds of businesses of how you would want to secure your data. And again, when I'm telling those stories, I'm trying to not just to give an example of one type of business, but I'm also trying to give different kind of examples from different kinds of business and how different the approach would be for those kinds of businesses. Like often the example that I use is like, let's say some kind of a retail sales organization versus let's say a bank or a financial institution, where the requirements for security will be so much different that it would not make sense even to like implement the same level of security that you would need to bank on the retail business, and vice versa. Because on a retail business, it's going to impair their ability to actually do business the way they normally do it, and vice versa. if you take, the level of security that is normally applied on a retail business to a bank will not be able to function simply because of compliance. They will not be, legally not be able to function with the same parameters in the same way that like a lower level security business would. Then we have a chapter about managing access to for admins and users. So this is, security access, security rights. It's kind of an extension of the data security, but also to who owns the data and how to make sure that you have the least amount of access from users and admins to data that is sensitive. And again, that does that through stories and examples. And then we have a chapter about monitoring and analytics. So how do you actually the last vestige of protection of your system is to, even if something happened, even if you were exposed to something, how you actually discovered that happened. And that goes through, monitoring and analytics. And the chapter talks about how to implement that and how to work with those tools that we have in the platform. Then we have the third part. The third part is a very small part. It's about extension of Power Platform. Again, it's not it doesn't go too much deep, doesn't do too much of a deep dive into the technical part of how the extension itself is being done, because it's not like a book that is meant for developers necessarily. And in that part, I actually refer to other books for developers that might kind of expand the topic even further, or documentation that will help expanding that topic even further. But it gives information to the admin of how it's being done. What opportunities are available to extend Power Platform, so that with that knowledge you can design your requirements and design your system accordingly. So you know that it's possible, and therefore you can go to your implementation team and tell them, this is what I want to do, because I know that it's possible to extend Power Platform in this way or that way, and this is kind of what I want to do. And then you have the implementation team to actually do that. And so we have here a chapter about email integration. This is kind of not exactly extension, but like a very basic integration. But also we are looking into more complex scenarios of email integration for high security solutions, like we're using certificates and hybrid exchange and like more advanced scenarios. But also we will look at like basic integrations that you have built in with Dataverse. And again, through use cases, we tell when to use which approach, and which approach has, what's the implications of each approach. Then we have a chapter about custom connectors, which is just an overview of what custom connectors are and what they can do, and most importantly, in what cases would you want to use them, and in what cases you would not want to use them. So what are not just the fact that they exist and this is how you build one. Actually, no, there's no information about how to build one, but it's about they exist. This is how one could be built if you need one, but this is the use case in which you would want to do that. And those are the use cases which you would not want to do it in, because you have other options, and those are the options that you have. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 options that you have as an alternative to building a custom connector. And in which cases, for example, building custom connector wouldn't even make sense, even if you do want to build something custom, because simply the reason for which you want to build a custom connector would not work, right? If you want to build something that Power Platform is simply not capable of doing, it doesn't mean whatever custom connector you build is not going to work anyway. And then the last chapter in this part is around advanced and automated management with PowerShell. So this is a topic that can be very important for large organizations, for enterprise scenarios where we are now adding more and more capabilities in Power Platform that can be managed with PowerShell. So you have the new PowerShell APIs for Power Platform. We are adding new PowerShell controls for Power Automate. There are already PowerShell controls for Power Apps and for Dataverse in general. So there's a lot of things which you can automate. And there's a lot of things that you can automate, not just by running, PowerShell scripts on your system locally, but also by building an automated system that runs those PowerShells, let's say based on a schedule or based on an event in the cloud, and then creates events or creates certain functionality that is based on those PowerShells. So you can actually build as an admin without hiring any developers or integrators, build your own quote unquote custom automations using PowerShell and use Azure to deploy those PowerShells and essentially run them in the cloud based again on a schedule or event or whatever it is. And I'm bringing in a few cases where you can use PowerShell to implement functionality that today doesn't even exist in Power Platform, but can be done with PowerShell, and how you would approach that. And then we have part 4, last part, Power Platform in the real world and business case analysis. So this steps away almost entirely from the whole technical stuff. So by this stage, we have essentially done discussing about what Power Platform is, what are the features, and how to use it. So by that point, we expect that the reader already knows how to use Power Platform and what it is and what it does, and has the I would say base functional knowledge and some technical knowledge in terms of administration of the platform. And we go more into looking into architectures, into cases, and how different architectures fit different business cases and how they're applied. So the first chapter is deploying Power Platform to serve millions of external users. This is kind of an analysis of situation where you are an organization that you might not be a large organization, but you have a large customer base, and your Power Platform implementation is made to serve that large customer base. So let's say you are, well, again, I can bring an example from real life where I worked on a project for a large public organization, so a central bank. And that central bank had citizen services, so every citizen would be able operations with the central bank. And that functionality was implemented with Power Pages. So essentially, you would have a Power Pages implementation that would serve millions of users. We also have the similar situation where I worked with the WHO. I worked part of the coronavirus task force when it all began, and I worked with the WHO to implement Power Pages based, well, back then it was called Power Apps Portals based solution to serve, to create a solution for different countries, where countries could implement that solution to essentially serve their citizens and help citizens to receive the social support or welfare support or whatever medical support they need in case they were affected by the coronavirus. If they lost a job, if they have a housing problem situation, if they have medical situation, whatever it is. Different governments in different countries implemented that system and allowed, in a matter of essentially, initially in a matter of weeks, implement a system that would help the entire citizens of those countries in a situation where it was very difficult. I mean, we definitely were not in a situation where you could launch a project which would take a year and a half to implement, because well, we all remember how it was, and especially if you were affected by that, then you remember how difficult it was. Next chapter is about managing access levels for your business data. So this is about kind of building the architecture to segregate data to either silo your data or on the opposite, make it more accessible across the organization, and how to make the decision whether you want to silo data or make it accessible across the organization. What are the use cases for that? What are the possible architectures, and whether the two can be combined, and in what cases. Then we have chapter 16 is about highly secure architecture for financial services and governments. Well, as I mentioned, there's a few examples about banks It's not a coincidence. A lot of my experience is working with large financial institutions and governments, and this is probably the most difficult and challenging experience or kind of work that you can do with business applications and really with any kind of IT work. And based on those examples, it tells you about the implementation of highly secure architectures, which you can use in those kind of projects. It doesn't have to be a bank or a government. There are other organizations where they require high levels of security, and that tells you all the basically tips and tricks and all the kind of architectures and all the use cases and all the features that you will need to do just that. Chapter 17 is dealing with licensing limitations, low-cost architecture. So as I mentioned, there is this whole, with the cloud, we have this whole new wave of quote-unquote license-oriented architecture, which is kind of, as architects, is something that architects don't really like. But as businesses, we also need to understand that businesses have a limited amount of money, and sometimes you have to implement something, well, essentially a worse solution because it is cheaper. And that is not an ideal world, but unfortunately, this is how it is. And this chapter essentially talks about how to try and balance the cost with the benefits, and gives several examples and several use cases where you can achieve, for example, something with very low effort, but at a very high cost, or very high effort, but a very low cost, and how you balance the two approaches, and how you find this kind of golden middle where you can implement something that is, not too complicated, and most importantly, not something that is going to be complicated in the future. Because part of the appeal of the cloud is not just it's easy to do now, but also the fact that you don't need to maintain that in the future. Even if it's easy to write, a small custom Azure function in C# that's something that's fine. That might take you, a day to do, and that's fine. But then there will be this custom piece of code which will be there, and at some point it will be this custom piece of code which no one will know where it came from, how to maintain it, if something is broken, how to change it, and we all know how it goes. So how to avoid that, how to build an architecture that is low cost, but also not trying to avoid those kind of pitfalls and those kind of situations where you create technical debt, which will essentially destroy you in the future. And the last chapter is around taking the organization to the cloud. So with Fast Track, Fast Track is an organization within Microsoft, within the product group at Microsoft, which actually I'm part of. And part of the services of Fast Track is to help customers move to the cloud with existing on-premises organizations. So there's an automated process that helps you to do that. It does most of the work for you, but not all of it. And since being involved in quite a few large-scale and sometimes very large-scale migrations for customers that we have to the cloud, I also wanted to dedicate the customer to that process and how that works, and how to avoid all the regular pitfalls of going to the cloud and how to make that a successful migration. So this is it. Again, I could probably talk about two more hours about it, but I also want to leave some time for discussions and questions.
I think we might have our first book club here. Look at this thing. We got the next year and a half mapped out with these chapters. There's a lot. There's a lot here to chew on. I'll just jump in. If everybody else, feel free to just get into the conversation here. One of the things that I was wondering here, just kind of starting off with, was, what do you see as some of the biggest hurdles for admins in the Power Platform, both kind of new admins and maybe some more seasoned admins?
So I think that we still have a situation where there's a lot of admins which are kind of coming from the classic IT administration, let's say, field, where they think about applications as they don't really understand cloud applications, not because they don't understand what a cloud application is, but they don't understand the philosophy behind the cloud application. They're trying to treat it as if it was, as they say, it's not the cloud, it's just someone else's computer. So it's not. It's not, I mean, it's nice. I mean, it's a funny joke, but it's not really the case. I mean, cloud applications work in a very different philosophy than classic application used to work. And this is the part where I think a lot of kind of classic admins are missing that part, missing that kind of philosophy approach, and something that, by the way, the book is also trying to address. I mean, not to think about it as something that runs in a box that is somewhere in Ireland or I don't know in North America, but something that is built to run in a scalable way, in a secure way, and in such a way that you cannot really pinpoint of where it is. And most importantly, you shouldn't care where it is. I mean, it's not your job to care anymore where it is. Your job is to make sure that your organization implements at the application level the requirements that you need, but how it works is no longer your problem.
Yeah,
And
and I think
that's a difficult step, right?
Yeah, and I love what you said there too. It was kind of that theory and practice versus it being a cookbook, and it gets us to think about this from that theoretical standpoint and what are the things that we have to be looking at, because it seems like to your point also. I mean, it's we have this idea of what an admin is in the kind of traditional role, but there's so much more that we have to think about, and we have to grow into this governance role as well and understand what these relationships are with the other parts of the company in order to make it successful, regardless of if you're 1 or 5 people running that. The one thing I'm kind of curious about, and we see the changes happening so quickly from Microsoft's side, and I'm thinking about like the personal environments now, which are starting to show up. And we think about trying to manage that sprawl, but also managing security and access, but then at the same time making sure that we're not impeding growth or value to the company. What are some of those ways that you start to think about managing that in relationship to the technology?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had this project with a fairly large bank, and in there they had so they didn't have any kind of cloud applications when we began, and the first cloud application was to be CRM to automate customer service, and then it went into automating their customer service for both their corporate division and for the retail banking, and then for sales, and basically within like a year or two, it took over most of their, or I would say all of their core front office business. So essentially, all of their business was connected to the cloud, and they have an entire floor of people responsible for systems and architecture and integrations and all that stuff. Load balancers, whatever it is, and of that entire floor, where there's like almost 100 people working there, there's 2 people working on the entire cloud portion, and 98 working on the mainframes and load balancers and all that crap on premises. So they have 98 people working on the legacy and 2 people working on the cloud, even though the cloud is most of the business.
Wow. Anybody else want to jump in? Any other questions that you want to ask? Well, we have Ilya here. And if you don't feel comfortable, you can put them into the chat here. We can answer them. Don't be shy.
Yeah, hi, I've got a question, Jason. Yeah, so do you have a lot of Dynamics background experience too? Seems like that's a lot of, of course, Dataverse is kind of coming from Dynamics. Luckily, I have a friend who's real versed in Dynamics 365, so when I have questions, I just go ask her, and she's like, "Oh yeah, you should do this, this, or this." I'm like, "Wow, you sure need a lot of background knowledge in the Dynamics stuff to really be successful." It seems like.
So are you asking, do you need a lot of background in Dynamics?
I was asking if you personally had a lot of background in Dynamics.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I would say I entered this whole Dynamics space as the Dynamics developer. It was during the 3.0 days, so quite a while ago. And then I moved into consulting and architecture. But yeah, I was with Dynamics since a long time ago. Essentially, I was at the beginnings of Power Platform, and when Power Platform was just starting, I was gradually moving into a more product management role. So like right now, I'm part of the Power Platform product team, and specifically, I'm working tightly with the Power Automate and Power Apps team. But also, one of my primary jobs is to engage with Dynamics customers, with large Dynamics customers, understand how they work, and try to build out the strategy of Dynamics in such a way that it's kind of within the expectations of our customers.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, thank you for answering that.
Yeah, then we had down here, when can we get the book?
Right, so it's now in review with the publisher. I think it should be out, I guess, by March. I'm not sure.
Great.
Yeah, but it shouldn't take a long time, I hope.
Will that be print and EPUB as well?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. You were talking at one point also about in there about PowerShell and automation. Do you see that also kind of is that part of like the North Star architecture and like landing zones, or what you're kind of talking about a little different from that?
So landing zones and North Star architecture is something that I mentioned in the secure architecture chapter, but the PowerShell is more about, it's not just about that, but it's more about talking about the fact that those capabilities exist, because they are not entirely, not talked about a lot. A lot of people don't even know that it's there, that you can do things like that at PowerShell. And then after exposing the reader to what you can do, I'm giving a few examples of what you could do to solve common problems or common business cases with those tools. And in fact, there are a few examples and a few cases where you could do something with PowerShell which you could not do otherwise at all. I mean, there's no other way to do it aside from PowerShell.
Do you find that as part of, because I know, one of the big conversations going on right now, is managed environments, but one of the, biggest, I think, pushback that we hear in the community is against the licensing side of the pushback, which kind of goes back to your licensing discussion earlier. Are you seeing more clients who are starting to implement managed environments, and if so, are they doing it like as just a whole scale kind of, we're going to push it out to everything, or are they more precise and surgical in the way that they're doing it?
So managed environments is very new, and the kind of customers I work with are usually larger customers, and the way they plan their purchasing and the licensing is usually at least a year ahead, sometimes even more. So I would expect that the kind of customers I work with, they would implement that starting by maybe like end of this year or next year, that time frame. I do see some information from like smaller customers, medium-sized customers, that they already trying to do that, trying to experiment with that. So there is that already available in the field, but it is still fairly new. So I would expect it to be out there next week.
Yeah.
But by the end of the year, I would expect that most of our partners would be aware of, first of all, what it is, because it also takes time for this information to propagate to our partners, and through them for customers to understand what it is and what are the benefits from that. And of course, as I mentioned, I mean, part of my job is to gather feedback and to understand what our customers actually think about the things that we deliver. And if we get some feedback that would require us to review or to do something differently, then I guess we would.
Is anybody else here using managed environments much? We're starting to work with it ourselves, especially with Power Pipelines lately. That's been great.
Yeah, that's a pretty good feature.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're also in the process of setting up managed environments. We've been using Power Platform for a little over 3 years now, but it's been pretty ad hoc so far.
Yeah, it does seem like always trying to pull that back in, doesn't it? Seem like everybody's in that kind of like 3 to 5 year range, and now it's like, okay, how do we really get control of this and make sure that it's secure?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this year specifically, we are also focusing a lot on kind of enterprise capabilities. So if you look at the release notes, you might have saw that we have a lot of features coming in that are focused more on governance, on security, and kind of improving the, I would say, enterprise experience of our platform. So it's less focused on features and more focused on kind of enterprise capabilities.
I think I'm happy about that. I don't know about anybody else. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, because I mean, in terms of features, I think that we are very well positioned against other competitors. But in terms of enterprise capabilities, it's definitely, what we have is fine for organizations that don't need much. But the few organizations, let's say, you may have 50 companies that are fine with whatever you have, but then you have, I don't know, the government of, the government of the US or the UK coming in and saying, we would want to implement that, but this and this is missing, and it's not like necessarily features, it's like compliance related stuff or security related stuff, without which they are legally not capable of implementing something like that. And I was myself involved with several conversations where I would have to talk to ministers of certain countries with a team of lawyers to try and kind of somehow adapt the laws of a country to make it even possible for the cloud, to be legal in those countries. I mean, obviously it's not, it's better now, but let's say 5-10 years ago, I literally had those kind of conversations.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I know we probably could keep you here all day, and there are enough questions on everyone, but maybe we can at the end of the year have you back, and once we've had a chance to kind of digest the book and go through it, and hopefully we can do that. But before we kind of wrap, are there any other questions? No, okay, I'll take that as a no. I guess my last question to you though is the use of the forte symbol at the beginning of your Finecraft. There is that. Are you a musician?
No, actually, when I designed it, I mentioned that to be the symbol for function.
Oh, okay, all right.
So
all right.
I take it you have an experience as a musician.
Yeah, that's where I went to first.
Yeah. Well, my background is as a mathematician, so yeah.
Well, they're closely intertwined. So
yeah.
okay.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
Ilya, thank you so much.
I just wanted to add this link here and to this QR code here. Just if you have some questions, you want to connect with me on social media, then this is essentially a link to all my social medias, to LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, whatever it is. So I'm happy to connect and talk to you and answer the questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. We'll be back next month with McFarland, and we'll be talking about DLP strategies. So make sure that you join us then, and we will, like I said, we'll keep this conversation going, and join the Teams chat, and just be part of the conversation, and really appreciate you all being here today. Thanks so much.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.